Mr. David Venn, as he takes us in the paper how 4G is really different from 3G and what new applications can it bring forth. Put your hands together. You're welcome, sir.
Is there a presentation coming up? Yeah. Okay, good morning everybody, ladies and gentlemen. As we attend this conference, I think no one here can overemphasize the impact that the internet is having on the whole of human society. And most of that has happened in the last 10 to 15 years. In fact, probably most of the important stuff has happened in the last 5 to 10 years. And I believe that access to the internet has and will continue to have a huge impact on life for everybody. Perhaps more so than the introduction of mobile phones. And today, mobile phones are considered more of an access mechanism to the internet as opposed to an end in itself. The internet breaks down barriers, it provides access to information, and like nothing else has done before. And it's a platform, as the NCC gentleman said earlier, that you can use for communications, to improve your social life or connect, and also to express your ideas. I think probably everyone in this room today has probably got a 3G phone on them, and they're using it. Not right now, but they've got it in their pocket. It used to be 2G, now everyone's got 3G. I predict that within probably less than 3 years, everyone in this room is going to have a 4G phone, because that's what you're going to have. You wouldn't have a 2G phone today, would you? Your phone is 3G, and in 3 years' time, it's going to be 4G. So the subject today is what's the difference really between 3G and 4G, and why should we be interested in it? First of all, on the sort of technology roadmap, you had 2G, you had 3G, you had lots of other technologies. And what this graph shows is that these are all coming together, they're all converging onto one technology, which is 4G LTE. And that's the technology that's going to evolve ahead of time as well. So it's called long-term evolution, LTE, and it's designed to evolve over time and get better and better. It's put together by the same people that did 3G, so it's the 3GPP standards people. But I think it's important to see where it's coming from, and it's actually born out of the 2G, the 3G technologies. Each of these technologies, you'll see, lasted about 10 years. 2G was around for about 10 years, 3G came in, bit of an overlap, another 10 years, and now it's 4G. And that seems to be the cycle. Who knows whether 5G is going to be here in 10 years, or whether 4G is just going to keep evolving as a bigger and better 4G. On to the next slide, please. When you look at 3G, I remember when 3G was launched. I was around at the time, and it was early days of mobile phones, but it was about 2001. It was a leap ahead from where we were with 2G. 3G it sold all sorts of promises of you were going to have e-medicine, you were going to have telecommuting, all these things were going to come with 3G. A lot of them didn't actually. You got data, you got email, and you got Facebook and stuff, but you don't see everyone working from home. You don't have operations being done remotely via 3G. There are a few actually, but it's not commonplace. The interesting thing about 3G compared to 4G is when operators got the licenses for 3G, they saw it mainly as a huge increase in voice capacity. They were running out of space in the old 2G networks, they were congested, and by getting 3G you get extra spectrum and you get extra voice capability. And you can do a bit of data as well. And that was the big benefit for operators at the time. And also with 3G, it's much more spectrally efficient. What that means is, if you're given a bandwidth by the regulator, if you're an operator, you can get a lot more voice phone calls down a 3G service than you can a 2G. So you can get more customers on for the same frequency allocation. And that was very important for operators, and it still is. But one of the big differences between 3G and 4G is 3G, as an operator, you have to configure it for voice and separately for data. So you have to choose how much of your capacity is going to be allocated to voice and how much is used for data. And when people try to use data on 3G, you're accessing the data part of 3G. Now, the reason why that's important is that all the big mobile phone operators make a huge amount of money out of voice telephone calls, because that's their business. So they want to make sure that as far as possible, that voice network is not congested. So you can imagine how that decision comes in terms of allocating data to voice. They want to make sure there's enough, or as much as they can put, capacity for voice. So just to give you an idea, you can get 10 times more data down a 3G circuit, if you like, or bandwidth, than you could with 2G. And 4G, it's a leap ahead again. The other thing about 3G is it was implemented basically in 2 bands worldwide. It was either 1900 megahertz or 2100 megahertz. And all the 3G operations around the world are in those bands. There's a couple of minor ones which aren't, but almost all of them are in those bands. And that was done purposely so that all the equipment was compatible. So manufacturers could produce hundreds of millions of handsets, and they would be as cheap as possible. And that's very different with 4G. It was first deployed in 2001, which means that it's about 15 years old now. It actually took about 15 years to develop it as well. So actually 3G started in the development labs about 30 years ago. But 15 years ago when it launched, around about 2000, 2001, if you had a computer then, you would be pretty smart if you had a Pentium 2. Okay, that's what they had in 2001. We've come a long way with computers. We've come a long way with technology as well. So the 4G networks that you see going in now are the very latest technology, state of the art. So there's been huge advancements, and some of those advancements have been put into 3G as well, but the underlying concept of 3G is 15 years old at least. That's when it was launched. It's mostly used to carry voice. If you look at the networks in Nigeria, most of the 3G networks are mostly carrying voice, and there's data on there as well. And so to some extent, the data capacity competes with the voice capacity. So as a user, you might get varying levels of service on data. Sometimes it works very well, sometimes it doesn't work so well. That's because a lot of the capacity is being used for voice telecoms. If you look at 4G, which is the next slide, first of all, just the underlying differences technology-wise between 4G and 3G. First of all, as I said, it's called long-term evolution. The idea of 4G LTE is it's going to evolve over time, and in fact, it's all designed for data. There actually is no voice in 4G LTE. Voice is like an add-on, which has only recently come out actually. It's called Voice over LTE. Hasn't been deployed very much at all yet anywhere. 4G is mainly about data. It's low latency, which means you get low delays, which is good for real-time applications. And it's designed to evolve. The standard says that the aim is to be able to have 100 megabits per second on your handset when moving, and when you're static, when you're still, you should be able to get 1 gigabit per second eventually. Okay, this is the vision, if you like. When they wrote the standard, they also envisioned that everyone's going to be traveling around the world in high-speed trains at 350 kilometers per hour. So the standard actually says that 100 megabits per second on the move in a high-speed train at 350 kilometers per hour. That's the target. So that's what they're trying to achieve with 4G over time. Don't try doing it today. It's not going to work today at that speed, but that's what they're aiming for. Now, in terms of spectral efficiency is about 27 times more than 2G. So you can get a lot more data down the same bandwidth. So for operators, you can squeeze more data down, you can have more customers. So it's more spectrally efficient, which means for the same amount of equipment and bandwidth, you can actually sell more. So you can make more revenue, so it's good for the business model. The cost, what that means to the customer is the cost per gigabyte is less, or it can be, if that's the way the operator wants to charge it. The other thing that's very different about 4G is that it's designed to work in almost every band. It's not just 1900 or 2.1 gigs. There's 7 or 8 different bands it can work in. And the idea is the world is changing, spectrum's getting congested, there's only small pockets of frequencies available for regulators to auction out or to farm out. And so this technology needs to work in all the bands. And a lot of the technology that's being produced, including the modems and the handsets, work in 5 or 6 or 7 different bands. So whichever one you want to use, you switch to that band, or the operator does, and it works automatically. So the idea is it can work in multiple bands, but also it can work in multiple bands at the same time. So in Nigeria, for instance, if you had a 4G network at 2.3 gigahertz, which is where Spectranet is, and you also had one that was at maybe 1900 megahertz, your modem could switch between the two depending on which had the stronger signal. That's the whole idea of 4G. The other thing to do with frequencies as well is the channel size. If you're a network operator, you're allocated spectrum and you're given a certain block of spectrum. 4G works in lots of different sizes of blocks, you can configure it, whereas 2G and 3G is very limited. So again, if you've got some spare spectrum flying around, you can probably launch an LTE, a 4G LTE service in that band. So it opens up all sorts of opportunities for new operators and for operators to take a bit of spectrum and introduce a high-speed data service. Mr. Ifram earlier from NCC, when he was saying about, it challenges business models, it really does. The existing operators get almost all of their revenue from voice telephone calls in Nigeria. I predict that in 3 years' time, no one's going to be paying for voice telephone calls in Nigeria. It'll all be free. And won't that be nice? Yeah? But you'll be paying for data. You'll be buying bundles. And in a lot of other markets, that's already there. I'm from the UK. In the UK, I've got a family bundle. I don't live there. I live here. But my family bundle is I have 5 SIM cards from my operator. I have, and it's all on one bundle. I get 10 gigs of data a month, which we can share between all 5 however we want. It just gets used, consumed from the same bundle. All calls, phone calls, and SMSs are free, unlimited. And that's a standard package. That's a family package from Orange in the UK, or EE it's called. That's quite normal. So you don't pay for voice. Imagine how that's going to change the business models here, where they're charging you per second for every single voice call. If you look at the differences between 4G and 3G and try to see, what's important in the differences, it really depends on your perspective. If you're a network operator, you may see it differently to if you're a customer, or if you're a regulator, or if you're maybe a new investor. So if you look at, first of all, network operators, which all of them at the moment are carrying 3G customers. They want more room for voice. So if you can get 4G, first thing you can do is you can offload all your data, get it onto the 4G network. That will free up voice capacity on 3G, and so decongest areas that are congested in the network. That's one huge advantage for a mobile operator, because, as I say, most of their revenue and their profit comes from voice phone calls. You'll see a lot of the operators now starting to get into new areas like entertainment, music, video, that sort of thing. There's going to be a lot more of that, offering broadband. These are new revenue streams for the mobile operators if they can get hold of 4G. The other thing as well that's quite interesting is they've already got, the mobile operators, a large network of towers all around the country. When you had 2G, they used to connect those towers with a 2 megabit circuit using a microwave radio. When it became 3G, they had to have a bigger circuit connecting to it because it had more capacity, you had more voice calls, and you also had a bit of data as well. So typically it was about 10 megabits you put on there. With a 4G tower, you need to have 100 megabits because that's the capacity of a 4G base station. So what that means is you can't really use microwave radio. You have to have metro fiber networks if you're going to launch 4G. And you'll see a number of the operators that are now building or trying to build fiber networks in the cities. And it's to support the future data requirements, because you cannot have a 4G network without fiber, because there's just too much capacity to put onto microwave. And as I said, moving towards data bundles. All the operators are going to have to start moving towards data bundles, because the new operators will be offering that, and voice will be free. So it's a real game changer. If you don't think that's going to happen, imagine, just think back, just a few years back, operators used to charge quite a bit for SMS, for text. And then what happened? WhatsApp. WhatsApp turned up. within 2 years, worldwide, not just here, but worldwide, SMS revenues disappeared. Everyone's using WhatsApp. It's free. It's not really free. You're using your data, but it's virtually free. And the operators who were previously charging a lot of money for a text, which actually didn't cost them anything to handle, lost all that revenue. And that all happened in a very short period of time, just about 2 years. It suddenly decimated their data revenues. If you're a regulator or a government and you're looking at 4G, what does it mean to you? First of all, it can certainly help deliver the National Broadband Plan, which I heard mentioned this morning as well. It certainly rolls out broadband data and availability to lots of people all over the country. It allows you to auction off spectrum that previously perhaps wasn't so attractive, and people can then launch 4G onto there. You can also refarm previous spectrum. So there's a number of pockets of spectrum that are sitting with operators at the moment in Nigeria that are not being used. The company's gone quiet or whatever's happened to it, but the spectrum is not being used. If somehow that could come back and be reallocated,